I was interested in reading this book because I've had a lot of experience myself with very serious clinical depression, and I know what it's like living with a burden of mental illness, and I've got nothing but admiration for carers of people with mental illness. I understand your own son Ben was diagnosed with schizophrenia at 17, and it must have been a huge burden for you. What's it been like coping with that?
One of the things that I've discovered on this journey of care is that you need good support of another person, ideally your husband or partner. You do need to have somebody else with you. And also you need to be able to strengthen yourself inside. And you have to have a sense of humour, and you have to realise that everybody's got a problem somewhere on the line, and this is just life. And for me, I just kept saying to myself, why not me? Why not us? We've had a good life till now. Why not us? And so... Was
it that sort of feeling when Ben was first diagnosed, that the injustice of it, that perhaps God's cruel joke on you, or nature's cruel joke that has chosen your son to be schizophrenic?
No, I can honestly say I never felt like that, but I was so traumatised that I could hardly eat. I lost about 10 kilos in 3 weeks. It was very traumatic.
What's the support mechanism been like in terms of family and friends? Have you found that maybe some friends, maybe even some members of your own family, have abandoned you, that you haven't got support from that direction? So, I mean, you need lots of support in lots of different directions. And
there's so much misunderstanding out there, and I think, not my immediate family, but I think, yes, I had some brothers and sisters, and even my parents. They had a complete misunderstanding of what schizophrenia was, and they started to think that it was all drug-related, and I had some very unkind things that have been, because of ignorance, that people have said about my son, that it was all he'd brought it upon himself and all sorts of, which was entirely untrue, through ignorance. So yes, it can be very hurtful.
I mean, your son's 26 now. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was 17. So if my maths is correct, that would have been about the year 2000.
Yes.
And he would have thought that by that stage of history there'd been enormous advances in psychiatry and social understanding of mental illness, and that a lot of the stigma had been removed from mental illness. So, I mean, did you find that sort of old-fashioned kind of stigma was still there with people, that people were just ignorant about what schizophrenia really is?
I think half and half. I think there have been big inroads into that stigmatism, and of course now the mental health organisations very much encourage people who are suffering with mental conditions to actually work within the sphere of the mental organisation, and my son's actually got a very good job as a counsellor for other people with mental conditions, and he works for a mental, I think it's Rua Outreach, which is associated with the Mental Health Institute of Western Australia, and also he works at Great Anne's Hospital as a counsellor and helping there, and they love him to bits, and it's given him, it's so good for his self-esteem.
It's brilliant. It's almost a way of getting revenge on his illness, that, hey, I'm going to use my illness as a platform to help other people and help myself as well. It's great.
And because you're working with people who understand, they don't expect you to work long hours and long days. They understand that they can probably only be committed for short periods of time, so they understand all of those, so they accommodate and help. The support is fantastic out there, actually.
And again, come back to my own experience, sometimes there's been periods in my life where I've defined myself entirely as a depressed person.
Yes.
And the way to get out of it is to be busy, to be preoccupied, to be engaged with society. And I guess, as I say, for your son Ben and for yourself, moving away from defining yourself as just a full-time carer must be important.
Exactly, and redefining that word schizophrenia too. People say, oh, so-and-so is schizophrenic. It's horrible. It just says
they're not a label.
Person. The same as you would feel. You're depressed. You're only depressed when you're depressed.
Yes.
When you're not depressed, you're a normal person, really, aren't you? You're normal anyway.
Have you found that, though, that with workmates or associates, acquaintances, again, even your own friends and family, that once your son was diagnosed, that they viewed him very differently, in the sense that now he's no longer a fully rounded three-dimensional human being. He's just this illness, schizophrenia with a capital S.
But the more that we were natural with it, inviting him round to our home, and we were just completely natural, the more the barriers were broken down. They could see he's just a normal guy. He likes to watch videos, he does normal things, that he likes his animals, he goes for walks, he works out at the body club, he has a little job. He's just a normal, he's got his own car, he drives his car. I mean, he's just a normal guy. There's nothing that sets him apart, really. So the more they realise that, I think it's broken down a lot of barriers. So when I say in the book, hey, who's suffering with schizophrenia? I mean, I say, who is suffering? Is it the person
Right.
who's got schizophrenia is not suffering? They are, to a certain extent, because they've got a little bit of insight, they will suffer, possibly. But on the whole, it's generally all the people around them that are suffering. You know, oh, my son's got schizophrenia, I don't know what to do, and it is a hard one. And I do believe in many cases, I mean, we've probably had an easy road through because it hasn't been complicated with drugs and things like can happen. I should imagine that'd be really difficult when people with mental illness confuse it with try to self-medicate with drugs, and then it becomes another problem.
That's one of the big myths about schizophrenia, isn't it? I mean, you mentioned that earlier as well, that everyone who has schizophrenia has taken too much acid or smoked too much dope. So in your son's case, that wasn't the case.
Not at all. But that's a big myth that's out there,
Yes.
you see. And people say that it gives them an excuse to say, well, they deserve it, we won't bother with them.
I'm going to ask maybe a confronting question here, but interrupting your own life plans. I mean, have you ever felt resentful towards your son in the sense that he's interrupted my own life plans or he's ruined my life? Or
hasn't interrupted my life plans at all, because we're here to care for each other. And my training and understanding is that we're all here, we have a role to play. We're just actors on the stage, so we just got a role to play. And I'm very contented and happy. It hasn't interrupted my lifestyle at all. If anything, it's enhanced it. It's given me an understanding of the power of love, real love, and support. I think it either makes or breaks you. It tests a relationship. I've heard of relationships that have just broken apart as soon as their son or daughter's been going through hard times like this. And so if you're not strong, they just splinter and break apart. But some relationships grow stronger. In our case, I think our relationship grew stronger.
one of the chapters of your book is giving negativity and self-pity the flick. And you mentioned earlier that it's important to have a sense of humour when you're caring for a schizophrenic son. Do you sort of consciously try to make light of it in a way? I mean, it seems like an absurd thing to say in a way, to make light of schizophrenia. But
we do, because our son's got a fantastic sense of humour. He's a great mimic. So because he watches so many movies, he can mimic anybody from Sean Connery right down to Mike Moore or whatever. He can just he can mimic anybody, and he brings out these classic sayings that are quite pertinent at certain times in a given situation.
Yes.
And I think one of the things is, he has a go at me with Brahma Kumara's, philosophy and my lifestyle that I follow. And he says, oh no, I'm Brahma Kumaris or something like that. Or he brings up all these funny little things which really, he has us in fits all the time. So he's got a wonderful sense of humour. And I think humour actually lightens and is very, very...
It's interesting what you say about his ability to mimic different people, and I've often thought myself when I've thought about schizophrenia that, because I've known quite a few schizophrenic people in my time, that
brilliant.
Yes, there often seems to be a correlation between schizophrenia and creativity. I've known a number of schizophrenics who are very creative people.
Yeah, well, look at the painter Van Gogh.
Yes.
He was so many creative people have bordered on the line. They say there's a fine line between
insanity
and a lunatic and a genius, isn't it?
Yes.
Something like that.
Yes.
And it's probably true. You either go, because the human condition is so wide, isn't it?
Yes.
And it's so interesting. And I think we're all valuable. Every single one of us is valuable. And if we're going through what's not considered to be right and normal in today's terms, hey, who cares? Because who knows what normal is anymore?